Today on Swarty Takes on St. Mary's, we delve into the rich history of the St. Mary's Museum. The community museum for the town of St. Mary's is located in a lovely old home sitting on a hilltop in a park on Church Street South. It was constructed from locally quarried limestone in 1854. When George Tracy, an early settler of St. Mary's, built it for his family, it was by far the largest home in a small village of log shanties. Almost immediately, it was nicknamed the Castle in the Bush. It has been the location of the St. Mary's Museum since 1959. Hello and welcome to another episode of Swarty Takes on St. Mary's. Tonight, I'm here at the St. Mary's Museum with curator Amy Coverly and museum board member Chet Gleason. How's it going?
Great.
You guys having a good time?
Wonderful.
Awesome. Well, we're just starting, so it might go downhill from here. I'll just jump right into this. Amy, whose house was this originally? Well, not the addition. We're in the addition right now.
The house that the museum's in was originally built by George Tracy in 1854. And so he was one of the first settlers to St. Mary's, and he purchased a couple hundred acres in the South Ward for a whopping $2 an acre.
Wow.
And turned a profit on much of that land as the town developed. So he lived in a log shanty on this property until he could afford to have this house built.
That's pretty amazing considering what properties cost now. When was the museum actually founded?
So the museum was founded in the 1950s by the local Women's Institute. So they had a committee and they had artifacts in their possession, but they didn't have a permanent home for these artifacts. So they were using vacant classrooms, storefronts, kind of whatever they could get their hands on, but they had to be open 120 hours a year to get an operating grant at that point. So whether it was a classroom or a storefront, it was open 120 hours a year. Eventually, in the late 1950s, an apartment became available in the museums, or in what is now the museum, in the Tracy House, and so they began renting an apartment in this building.
Excellent. Now we're here in the textile room of the museum. And Amy, how does the museum acquire their artifacts?
So every artifact that we get at the museum is acquired through donations. So we don't have a acquisitions budget. And we actually receive or are offered far more than we can accept. So we have a collections mandate policy that kind of outlines what we can and cannot accept. So generally, something has to have a St. Mary's collection because we're mandated to share the history of St. Mary's and the surrounding area. So anything that was made in St. Mary's or used in St. Mary's or has some sort of special connection to our community is what we generally go with. Curator rant coming this way. Do not leave things on our doorstep. Nothing upsets a curator more than coming in on a Monday morning and finding treasures just sitting on the doorstep that have potentially been rained on over the weekend. So if you're looking to donate something to the museum, please set up an appointment with either myself or one of my colleagues.
Especially since there might be some kind of history behind
Well, yeah,
that.
you want to get the context. When someone drops something off, we want to know like where it came from, who had it, how long they had it for, where they got it from. Like all of that stuff is really important for the historical context of the piece. So if something is just getting dropped off and we have no story behind it, it's not much good to us.
Exactly.
Now, as part of the museum board, I'm just going to throw this out there. Do you have to get all the artifacts approved by the museum board, or is there like a process that you go through, or is it just your say, or is it?
So typically it's staff working within the parameters of our collections policy, which was approved by the board. So the board is involved with deaccessioning though. So on the rare occasion where we're actually taking something out of our collection, the board has to approve that decision. Oh. So I can't just house clean some Saturday morning.
We don't need this anymore.
Exactly. Yes, that does not happen in museums.
Perfect.
I don't think it's happened. I've been on the board 10 years now. I don't think it's happened. It might have happened once, way back near the beginning, but very rarely, unless something deteriorates to the point where it can't be fixed, it can't be, restored in any way possible, and pretty much everything can be restored to some degree. Sometimes it requires shipping it to an expert very carefully, but for the most part, deaccessioning happens very rarely.
That's pretty cool. Well, good to know.
Amy made these.
There you go. That's
These
This
are
is,
quilts.
yeah, so these are quilts that have been rolled on cardboard tubing that I wrapped in Mylar, and then I hung them on PVC plumbing pipe.
But this is what she's not just a curator, and she's not just an art artist. She also builds structures.
A regular Mike Holmes.
Yep, totally.
She
Awesome.
didn't make the quilt though.
So, Amy, what are some of the exhibits that you have on display at the moment?
So we have a number of temporary exhibits on display right now. The one that we're standing in front of, though, is our Bieber of the 1880s exhibit. So this is more of just a little display. We got this display case actually last year, and we were quite excited about it and looking for something fun to fill it with. And opportunity arose with the success that the Stratford Perth Museum is seeing with the Justin Bieber exhibit. So we were actually chatting as a board, why can't we have a Bieber in St. Mary's? Why can't we have someone that's bringing thousands of people into our museum and eating in our restaurants and shopping in our shops? So we kind of just put this up as a joke, but it is about Nora Punch, who was quite truly world famous in her time in the 1880s.
Cool.
Get your heard out, Stratford.
So, Amy, are there any permanent exhibits? And I'm going to guess yes.
Yes, in the sense that we're in an 1850s house and things like our dining room can't really become anything other than a dining room. We do change out the art and the tableware and stuff like that, but it essentially is always a dining room. The room we're in right now, it's the Richard Holt Military Gallery, and this is an exhibit which changes annually. So right now we have an exhibit looking at war medicine. And so it was actually put together by two of my colleagues, and it uses case studies from the First World War to look at some of the medical innovations that happened, and it's all local examples, so really interesting.
Amy, what's one of your favorite artifacts here in the museum?
So I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but one of the most interesting artifacts at the museum is this hair wreath. And so this is a fairly common household arts and crafts practice in the 1800s. Ooh. So if you look closely at some of the petals, there's 5 petals on there and there's 5 people's different hair. So before bed, women would brush their hair, keep it in a little hair receiver beside their bed, and then craft with it.
And none of this would be considered creepy?
No, not at all. I have yet to visit a community museum that doesn't have a hair wreath.
Wow. So. My times changed. You would be blacklisted so fast now. No, but that's a very cool piece of history. Mr. Gleason?
My favorite is I'm a bit of a dinosaur buff, so my favorite is actually a fossil that was found by an employee at the St. Mary's Cement Company. They were dynamiting in there, and he happened to notice this kind of spiral shell, and he jumped out and he chipped it out, and he donated it to the museum. So we actually took it to a paleontologist at the University of Western Ontario a couple of years ago, Dr. Jasuo Jin, and he identified it as a coiled nautilus, which is actually an animal that's still alive today.
Wow, that's a pretty big one by the looks of things.
It's huge. They get similar to this size currently, but this one is 400 million years old.
Wow.
So all the fossils that are found locally are from a geological period called the Devonian period, which was about 400 million years ago. So it predates the dinosaurs. But basically all the land that now encompasses the St. Mary's Stratford area was at one time down along the equator. And it was a seabed of a shallow sea, inland sea, and part of the ocean. So what happened was there was this big mountain range, and it slowly eroded over time, and it was almost like the land kind of melted like ice cream, and it spread out. So all that land that was at one point at the equator ended up here where we are now, and that's why all the fossils you find around here are all aquatic. It's all sponges, shells. In fact, if you go downtown, if you look at some of the stone buildings along Water Street, you can actually look at the bricks. They were cut right out of the river, and you can actually see shells, fossil shells that are embedded inside the bricks, because that's what the rock looks like here. So
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, But that's, yeah, cold nautilus. If they were to dig out the middle a little bit, you would actually see that this is a spiral. This is natural limestone in the middle. It would take a very meticulous professional to kind of chip all this away so that you can actually see the animal underneath it. But anyway, that's it.
So we're now downstairs in the museum, a rarely seen entity of the museum. This is the vault, and we are standing here in the Lorne Eady archives, a bunch of newspapers that have been stored down here from a long time ago, and Amy's going to tell us about it.
All right, so we are, as Swarty said, in the Lorne Eady Archives vault. Behind me is the local newspaper, the Journal and the Argus. They were actually two separate newspapers up until the 1920s when they became the Journal Argus. So we have hard copies of the newspapers back to the 1850s. We also have them on microfilmed, and they are indexed up until 1913. So that's a really popular genealogical resource for us. We have all the births, marriages, and deaths indexed, and at that time, everything made the news. You went and visited your sister 2 miles down, it made the news. So they're a really great community resource to have. They tell us everything about everyday life in St. Mary's and the surrounding rural area. There were lots of correspondence from each of those little communities. So Kintore, I don't know, all of those,
Kirkton,
Kirkton, Motherwell, all those
Rannoch.
little tiny towns had
Each-
their own little correspondent. So in addition to this, we do have municipal records. So we have assessment records and council minutes, bylaw books, so we can look up property histories for people. We also hold all sorts of photographs and different institutional collections, so things like the Girl Guides, local women's institutes. We have all of their minute books as well. So lots of research that can be done here.
Artwork.
And art.
Lots
Yep.
of artwork. Can you tell people how they can access the archives if they have anything that they have any queries that they want to investigate or whatnot?
So we're always reachable by email or by phone, which we'll discuss later on. Otherwise, we're open regular hours, so you're welcome to just stop in. We do encourage you to make an appointment, and then we can really sit down and go through the resources we have here. But essentially, everything here, we collect this for the public, and with some exceptions, everything here is publicly accessible, and we are here to help you with your research projects.
And this is all climate control,
Yes.
right? To maximize preservation.
So it's cool and dry down here.
So the paper and the materials deteriorate at a slower rate.
So, Amy, can you tell us a little bit about Melodies at the Museum and what it's all about?
I can. So Melodies started, this will be our 6th year, so it started back in 2012 with 2 concerts on the front lawn of the museum, and it was just admission by donation. We had 2 local performers, and from then it's grown to every Wednesday evening in August. So this year there are 5 Wednesdays in August, so it's going to be 5 concerts back to back every week. And we're really excited this year because there's a new amphitheater being built in Cadzo Park. So
Yeah.
we're going to be moving our concerts from the front lawn down to a proper stage. So we're really excited to have a proper stage this year and just a bigger space. We've actually outgrown our front lawn, so we're really excited about moving into the park. So the concerts still work the same way, 5 local musicians, admission by donation, and it is a major fundraiser for the museum.
How can people get a hold of you? What are your hours? All that fun stuff. How can people keep current online? And how can they find you there?
All right, so the best way to get a hold of us is by phone or email. So all of our contact information is on our St. Mary's Museum website, so just stmarysmuseum.ca. That's the easiest way to find us. If you're looking for special events, programs, stuff like that, our Facebook page is generally the best way to see what we're up to and see what events are coming up. And the absolute best way to stay in the loop is to buy a museum membership.
Ooh.
So there's the Friends of the Museum. They offer $10 memberships. It's good for a year. And that gets you access to all sorts of e-blasts before we officially launch our programs. So For example, our seminar series tends to sell out every month, but our members find out about it before the general public. Another great resource we have is Picture St. Mary's, so you can get to the link from our website as well. And we have about 3,000 photos that are digitized and up on that website. We are also digitizing Dorothy Eady's Eat at Our House columns right now, and those are absolute gems, just really interesting insight into everyday life in St. Mary's when she wrote those, and
Awesome.
all sorts of funny stories.
So that was a really interesting visit to the St. Mary's Museum. Everybody should come out here and check it out on your weekends during the week. If you're retired or a newborn, you know, they'll accept anybody in here. So it's a lot of fun. You can find me at hashtag St. Mary's Famous. You can search that on YouTube and Facebook. And I'd like to thank both Chet and Amy for having me. Thank you and have a good night. Thanks for watching.
Don't lean on the piano.
Sorry. I'm sorry. We might as well just give me the chair that Irvin Mean sat in. Whoops! Smash. Yeah, it was a
Can't lean on the artifact.
It was a really good time, and I've probably just taken the bronze out of there with my elbow grease, but it's okay.
Take the bronze out of you.
I'll take the bronze out of you. Famous last words.